gallery, please note that we are about to, or we are to commence recording of this meeting. Your video and audio will be recorded and live streamed from now on. Thank you. This is a meeting of the Coorong Finance Committee. Sorry, we're a fraction late starting. I will read the civic prayer. Almighty God, help us to duly and faithfully carry out our numerous duties to the best of our judgment and ability, the advancement of this district and the benefit of all whom we're here to serve. And the Coorong District Council acknowledges the traditional owners of the land on which we meet. Thank you. I understand we have an apology for this committee meeting from Councillor Eads. Is that right? Councillor Bland may be a late arrival, we understand. Our Finance Officer, Judy, is away sick, and our Director of Infrastructure and Assets is also away on an urgent family issue.
Not a baby.
It's not a baby. Urgent family issue. So we, in terms of our questioning, we may need to take some more notes because of that. Well, it's confirmation of minutes of the meeting on the 16th of April. Councillor Around, can you move that way?
Yes, I'll move that way.
Councillor Taylor. Any discussion around those accuracy of that or otherwise? There being none, I'll put the motion. All those in favour? As against, that's carried unanimously. Minute action list. Councillors, anything in the minute action list you wish to discuss? Don't rush me. There being nothing, we move on. Questions with notice, there is nil. Items 5.2, questions without notice, is there any? If there is none, move to motions with notice, there is nil. Move to motions without notice, any motions without notice, councillors? There is none. Welcome, Rex, on Zoom.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody.
So Rex Mooney, one of our advisors, has joined us via Zoom on the screen for the recording benefit. Move to number 8, materials contractors and other budget monitoring processes. Is there a recommendation? Yes, there is. Does someone want to move that way so we can discuss it? Thank you, Councillor Wayne. Thank you very much. Thank you, Councillor. Yes, thank you. There's, thank you, Councillor. Who wants to speak to the report?
Well, Mr. Mayor, can I just start the ball rolling? So I'd like a bit more clarity about this. It says a lot, but it doesn't tell you much.
So
I hope the
background
Rex is going to enlighten us.
To let you know that we're starting to look at different ways of presenting the data to you. We're also looking at ways, and this goes back to the efficiency dividend that was put in the last budget for us to find, I think it's 3%, and it's flagging with you that we're starting to think about those things in terms of both presentation of the information so that it's easier for you to digest rather than us just doing a dump of our systems. And the second thing is that we are then, with that revised way of looking at things, we also will be starting to look at where the savings can be made. Do we have the appropriate processes in place to, and a simple example is, do we have a process in place that checks what we buy against what the account comes in at? And that, I'm not saying we don't do that now, but that's a simple, so it's about just flagging with you that we're starting to change the way we look at things and then present to you. We will take your feedback from that presentation, of course, but then we just wanted to work through the process. So there's not a lot of content in here, it's really just flagging the changes. Rex, would you like to say any more on that?
Yeah, thanks, Bridget. Yeah, good morning to everybody. Thanks for having me today. Yeah, I've put this report together and yeah, you'll see the motion is to receive and note it because it's a preliminary report. So what we're doing is just giving you a heads up that I've sort of had a look at things, and I think there's probably a better way of doing what you're doing and being able to achieve the same thing, but more efficiently and informatively. So I think where Bridget was saying we're talking about looking at things in a different manner. So you recall when we went through the annual budget setting process, the focus I had wasn't so much on account number and total balance per account number. It was more on line item of expenditure. So you got your 4 basic line items being employee costs, materials, materials, contractors and other expenses, depreciation and finance charges. Now, I'm of the view that you need to use a different budgeting technique for each of these line items because they've got different, due to the different nature of each type of expenditure. So for 3 of the 4, you've got a key source document that you can reconcile everything council-wide back to. So the employee cost, you got your wages staff list. For depreciation, you got your fixed asset registers and the asset data in the aesthetic system. And for finance charges, you've got your loan amortization schedules, and so you know how much you have to repay each year. Okay, but the one that's more difficult is materials, contractors and others. Okay, because that can be a whole range of different things, which, you know, obviously there's not one central document like the other 3 expense lines that you can tie it back to. So accordingly, this is what I said in the report, that you need more sophisticated processes, and it's going to be a little bit more labour intensive and involve a bit more of management's time, but in particular the budget owners. So like I sort of think there needs to be more information as to what actually makes up each budget. And so effectively, it needs to be better articulated what the assumptions are for each budget line, because there's some pretty large numbers there. And as well as that, there needs to be a stronger link between what the expenditure is and the service that's being provided for, and whether that's a one-off service that's partially funded by a grant, or something that's one-off because of a particular reason it needs to be done just for the say the 2021 year, but it won't be recurring. There needs to be information like that there. But overall, I think in order to get that sort of information, there needs to be additional input from staff at a lower level. So it's not just a finance department thing. The actual budget owners need to be more involved in developing the reports and providing information to the finance committee that gives them better information to allow them to better understand what's in the budget. And then when you get variances to budget in these reports that come later in this agenda, well, you're in a better position to understand the reasons for these variances. But overall too, a process such as what we're going to work towards will also be essential to make sure we lock in the savings, because you'll recall we had a bit of a target figure. It's about $6 million for materials, contractors and other in the annual budget. Now that was a savings, or a targeted savings, of about 300,000. So as well as providing better information to elected members, this same information would be used at management level to ensure that, you know, we don't exceed that budget. And so that's why we've got it in. We thought it was appropriate to just report back on this key budget line on its own in its own report to the finance committee, just so you know that we are about to undertake a fairly significant body of work to improve the governance as to how this is managed. So you're right. It's a bit light on in action, but it's effectively a heads up report. This is what we're doing. And the reason we're doing it is because we don't want to exceed our budget in materials, contractors and other. So that's about all I want to say on it, but if I'm happy to take questions.
Councillor Roundtree had a hand up next.
Hi, Rex. I think one of the things, I mean, it's really, I think this, what you put here is good, and the information that we're going to get is good. I think from my perspective, I've been in this role for 20 odd months now, nearly 2 years. And I just feel as a group, we have not had access to this sort of information, and we've needed it. And it's been an incredibly frustrating journey so far in finance, having so many different things presented that don't sometimes even add up. And so I welcome this. I think getting all this extra information is great. And you're right, it's going to take all staff inputting information into a system for that system to actually work. And without that, it's a useless system. So it's got to be a buy-in from everyone involved in the process to get it to work. And it's so I sort of feel a bit dismayed sometimes that this hasn't occurred before. I mean, how on earth do councillors ever make decisions on things without having access to the? I mean, you've been auditor for longer than I've been a councillor, but how have we been able to get past this in the past? You know, how have we been able to get this information, or we just not have this information? Because to me, it's fundamental to understand this business, that it is a business. We're dealing with money. It's fundamental to have that information, and I just think we're still halfway through our term, and it feels like we're just starting. And I don't think that's good enough from a council's perspective, for councillors to have to fight so hard to get information and to be flying blind for nearly half the year. So I'm welcoming of it, but I'm also critical we haven't done better in the past.
Can I just respond to that? Yeah, and I understand where you're coming from there, because that's the whole reason I sort of suggested putting this report together. But just to give you a bit of reassurance, that there is a process in place that works effectively, because otherwise you wouldn't be producing the forecast results that you're looking at for this year, which is, as I think we've covered in other meetings, we're actually tracking quite well in relation to our operating result, which is effectively the key financial indicator that is most affected by this type of analysis. So there are processes in place, but what they're doing at the moment, if I could sort of distinguish between that and what we're proposing now, is that the 4 different expense lines are all reported in one account number, whereas and so there's sort of an attempt to have a one-size-fits-all budget process. But what I'm trying to do is bring to the table a more sophisticated budget process, and basically improve on what they're already doing. Now, if there wasn't a process of some sort already in place, you'd find you'd be having large overruns and you wouldn't be producing the operating results that are within the acceptable range at the moment from recollection. So it's not like there's no process in place. It's just difficult to articulate it to you in the format that you're looking for. So I know exactly what you mean there, and I'm hoping that what we're proposing will go a long way to addressing your concerns, albeit a bit late maybe.
Councillor Roundtree's still got some more questions.
Just it's more of a statement, I suppose, that when we became councillors in this new term, and you were on the audit committee, heading the audit committee, we were heading for an $11 million deficit, and now we're not. And to me, that means someone wasn't watching when someone should have been watching, or they didn't have the information in front of them to make better decisions in order to not be heading towards an $11 million deficit. And so whilst I'm pleased with our new position, I just think we must never end up back in that position again. So information and accurate reporting is the only way to move forward.
Yeah, no, I agree. And I think you're referring to the draft long-term financial plan that was put up a couple of years ago. Is that the document you're referring to?
Yes.
Yeah, and you'll recall at the time I said that as audit committee chair, I moved a motion saying that it wasn't acceptable and that can only be treated as a baseline situation, and a more aggressive financial strategy and better systems need to be developed. And so I do think whilst they're not in the format that I'm proposing now, I do think there has been some level of improvement since then, because obviously, you know, we're not trending in that direction anymore. So you know, I think it's just, this fits more into the continuous improvement sort of framework rather than starting from scratch and giving you new stuff. It's building on what's already there.
Councillor Arthur.
Rex, couple of questions. First of all, are you able to integrate the system you're talking about with our existing IT, or is it can't be done until the IT is upgraded as per the budget process?
My intention is to sort of coordinate the process. Now the process is owned by management, and in particular the finance department, and it'll involve not just senior management and elected members, but also the people at the level below. And so, whilst we're in the process of upgrading the corporate governance system, I don't think the fact that we haven't got the updated corporate governance system implemented yet is going to be a barrier to achieving the objectives. But again, I just need to make it clear where my role in this is, just so you're not getting any unrealistic expectations. I'm advising and assisting and suggesting processes, and I've put together a draft project plan as to how it might look. But the owners of this process are management, which is, I think, probably stating the obvious. But it's gonna be a collective effort to produce what sort of being suggested in this report. Bridget, do you have anything you'd like to add to that?
You can use any system you like, in a sense, and it's only as valid as the information you put in. The fact that we are moving to a new system, we may not make it as sophisticated in the first instance, but what Rex is saying is we can certainly recut it to have those four different domains of the expenses of the organisation, which is depreciation, your finance charges, your goods and services, and your staffing arrangements, because then you can track much more closely where you're under and over, and you get a much more clearer view of each of the particular expenses. The way we present it to you now is really just a long list of things, and we have staffing mixed up with expenditure, and it's not clear where the different expenditure is either under or over. And then once you've got your goods and services, you can then drill down to each of those lines, because there's a whole range of goods and services that you use, to each of those to look at, was it fit for purpose? Was it what we expected? Did we go over? Why did we go over? Are we under? Why were we under? And so it gives you a better analysis. Now, how much work you put into doing that, and we can do that now with our current system, but then once we get the new system, it'll be a much more sophisticated and automated process. What you see now, Councillor, and this goes back to Councillor Roundtree's question, is that the presentations to you now are a lot. We make it hard work behind the scenes still in the way we've got our finances set up. There's a lot of discussion and analysis that goes on in the background. And Rex is suggesting that the next stage of that is that we recraft our reports so that it shows a much clearer and what's generally a better financial standard, and one that I'm used to, where the four domains are categorised. So, long answer, we can do it with what we've got. But we'll have a much more automated and clearer system when we get the new one.
Because that is, with all due respect, Bridget, that has been the answer we've been told for many a year today. We can't give you the information because the system is not set up. And now, like that, if your system's not set up to provide that information, you should have got set up to provide that information. Now, what Rex is doing, I think, is great. And like so, one of the biggest things that I've always found that I particularly have a problem with is grants that are paid that are not going to be spent for next year, the carryovers. I know, Rex, and we've spoken about that. Now we are recording it, but it's in the figures here that we've received for 2006. There's some terrible anomalies in there, mistakes that just stand out. Now, does this mean, Rex, that hopefully that we will then, as our grants in particular will be itemised, expenditure against those grants are itemised, because that's got to be a big saving if that's done properly. Because if you get a Commonwealth grant or a state grant, you've got to acquit them, and you've got to be able to do it properly. Now, how we've been doing the acquittal on some of these, it would amaze me. So I think that's a big plus. The only thing is, why is it going to take till November?
Councillor, this is still a lot of work, because as you said from the beginning, our systems aren't set up to just print out what we want in terms of, that's a true statement. Our systems aren't set up for what Rex is suggesting in terms of the four different expenditure categories. It takes a lot of background work to get that to happen. And you'll see, and to your point about quitting of grants, you'll see with the draft grant, that first $1 million, how we acquitted that grant by item by item is what we want to tend to go forward in the future. Grants are always a little bit tricky because there's sometimes a point in time they're paid in 1 year and not expended until the next, but so all that has to be accommodated. But how we've done the draft grants is what we expect to go forward with all the other grants. Fixed and reserve will be the next one that we will acquit in a similar way, and you will get the information for it. So there is an intention that there's transparency and clarity around each of those. Now, there is still a lot of work to be done there. That's not our systems. We just can't push a button and those reports come out, which I have to admit I'm used to. So it does take a lot of background work, and so that's why Rex is suggesting by the next finance committee we will have done some of that work in recrafting what we need to do to get the reports in a condition that we want to give to you. Because the first thing we want is transparency, and I can't speak for what happened in the past. Coming in and saying we're having $11 million in deficit in something is probably not the wisest move to present to a council without some context around it. So, and I think Rex's comments on that when he was on the audit committee chair are perfectly rational in terms of how that was dealt with.
So, Rex, the target is to present another report to council in November.
Yeah, that's what I'd be looking. Hopefully, is that we've addressed it, because we've got a fair bit of time between now and then, but we've got a lot of things to do. Obviously, the biggest thing we need to do is the annual financial statements. But one of the things that will be coming to the November Finance Committee meeting will be the supplementary data, or the detailed management level data in relation to Budget Review 1. And what I'm hoping to have is a report that specifically attends to the issues in relation to materials contractors and other expenditure. So that's what I'm hoping to have, and still it'll be the first cut of the new process. So it'll then be we'll be looking for feedback from the elected members as to whether it's then meeting their needs, and if there's further areas that can be improved. But just backtracking a little bit to reaffirm what Bridget was saying in relation to the grants and the point that Councillor Arthur brought up. And you see that's I see that as one of the key structural changes that the next report should show. Because you see, effectively they're what you call non-recurrent expenditure in most instances. You got your financial assistance grants, they recur each year, but they're not actually tied to specific projects. But a lot of your other grants are one-off grants. And so you want to be able to separate that type of expenditure from the expenditure that you receive year in, year out, because the expenditure that you receive year after year, or that you incur year after year, you need to understand what that actually is and what services it's providing. And then once you've got that basis, you can also determine, well, are there any ways we can do the same thing cheaper? So anyway, for what it's worth, that's what I think will happen.
Any other questions?
Great initiative, I must say. Been a long time coming.
Rolling.
Yep.
Close that.
Close. We finished.
Yeah. Well, I think what we do.
I thought it was an open and shut.
Close the button. I will put the recommendation as it was, I believe. Yes. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Number 9, Finance Committee Work Programme and Meeting Dates for 2021.
Rex can talk more about this, but this was really to bring the dates, and you will notice, and Councillor Hill alluded to it, where we changed the meeting. The time I think we reflected the old meeting a month ago, we realised that it didn't quite suit in terms of where we were in the budget cycle. So we really do want the Finance Committee meetings to make sense in terms of the other things that we do every year in terms of that budget cycle, so that we're not in a position of having to cancel a meeting because it didn't make sense to have it at that point in time. So this is a recommendation around how that should work and what the 4 meetings a year should be and why we're positioning them in those particular spots. Rex, did you want to add anything to that?
Yep, that's pretty right. So part of it's about the timing of the meeting. As well as that, most of you will be aware that we've got a pretty detailed audit committee work program that's that's particularly useful for elected members to know what's coming up in the next agenda and even the meeting after that. And as well as that, it gets updated at the end of each meeting and becomes a record of achievements as well. So what I was thinking here when I suggested drafting this report was that we get a similar work program moving forward, because the other thing we want is we want the Finance Committee and the Audit Committee to complement each other, but without actually covering the same material at both meetings. And so in general terms, the Audit Committee's got a range of governance issues or reports that it's supposed to receive that are outlined in accordance with the Local Government Act and the financial regulations. Whereas what the intention of the Finance Committee meeting is to actually dig a bit deeper into the material that underpins these more summary level reports that go to the Audit Committee. And so the idea is that, you know, we have it moving in the same cycle as the budget review and budget setting process, and then we can utilise the Finance Committee to dig deeper into what's actually underpinning the budget reviews and the budget that's being sort of assessed at a strategic level in Audit Committee and then ultimately adopted in Council. So that's the idea there. So again, you know, it's nothing, it's just a bit of a heads up that we'll put it to the next meeting. And it's something that we can workshop with the elected members, and you know, as well as the budget cycle, there'll be a number of other reports that you'd expect to go to the Finance Committee, but not the Audit Committee. And so, you know, that'll then be built into a 12-month plan. And so you'll be able to see, as you can with the Audit Committee at the moment, you'll be able to see what's coming up. And then as time goes by, you'll also have a record of what's being considered at the meetings. And again, what it's doing is it's adding another level of monitoring above what's already there at a statutory level. So it's just further what's the word, insight and involvement by the elected member body to ensure that the finances are tracking in the correct direction. So yeah, again, I'll throw it open to any questions.
We'll get a motion first, Councillor Roundtree, you moving that way?
Yes.
The recommendation that we receive a note preliminary report covering the development of the work program, associated meeting dates for the 2020-21 financial year. We'll second that, Councillor Coorong. Any questions to anyone? Councillor Roundtree.
So I just wanted to thank the management team for taking the Finance Committee seriously. I think there was some conjecture in the beginning if it was necessary. I think the way you've worded it, saying it can work complementary with the Audit Committee, is actually really good. It was one of the things that confused me in the beginning when I asked questions about how the council was in the state it was in, who didn't pick up on things, and I was told that audit only looked at the process part, not the detail part. And it really stuck out in my mind, who was looking at the detail part then, if it's all high level, who's looking at the bottom stuff. And so I think the dates you've proposed, the reason for proposing them, and the methodology behind where you see finance fitting, I think makes a lot of sense in my head, and I'm actually really happy to see that you've embraced that. Will help us learn more about the business that we're in charge of. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Anyone else around this recommendation? Councillor Arthur.
I agree with what proposed here, Rex. And just one of the things, I suppose it goes back to what we was talking about previously. With the LAP scheme, should we be including that in the council all the time? Why shouldn't we not have it as a separate entity within the budget system? Because, you know, for example, it can, you know, it has a huge influence on your budget line, whether you get extra grants or you don't get extra grants, and when you get them, what you spend. For example, you know, one of the things, you know, in last year's budget, in the income expenditure, you know, it was, we budgeted $709,000. I don't know where we got that figure from, but, you know, that's something that's pulled out of the air. We only received $527,000. So it was minus $181,900 funds not received or grants not received. So that just has a hell of an influence on our budgetary system. All of a sudden, there's 200,000 that we had as an income that's not there, but we never knew we were going to get it. So wouldn't it be feasible to have it as an adjunct system alongside Rex?
Yeah, no, I fully agree, and it's my intention to try and develop systems or reports that segregate that out, because that's a classic example of an activity that varies from year to year, and depending on the variances from year to year, it can have a significant impact on achievement or otherwise of whatever the budget figures were for that particular year. So that's an area that, you know, I'm aware that the management are also got in their sights and they've had a look at. And just to give you a bit of background, and this is probably an area too where I was talking about the frontline staff being more involved. So there's 2 staff that work in this area. And so effectively I'd see them being involved in providing a lot more information that puts some context in writing in relation to the budgets that you see each year in relation to that. I still don't think they need to be reviewed more than quarterly, but it's definitely an area that needs to be reported on better and segregated from your day-to-day operations, because it can distort the overall result. And so having said that, I'm also aware too that there is, as Bridget said, there's a lot of work that goes on behind the scenes. And so I know that whatever figure was in a budget would have been tied to grant applications made. There wouldn't be just notional amounts made up and added to a budget and then, you know, oh, we didn't get that, so they take it out at the end of the year. It's, from what I understand, there'd be a number of grant applications with an amount requested in each application, and that'd form the budget. Then the process goes through. We may or may not win the budget. We may win more or less than what we applied for. But again, all of these variables, if you've got the budget assumptions set up clearly in the first place in a written document that explains the numbers, well, then when the goalposts shift because of whatever the granting body does, well, management can explain it to you clearly, and it probably won't even raise any questions, because the idea is that it's just clearly explained and okay, that's what's happened. So anyway, for what it's worth, I agree on that one.
And to you, Mayor, it'll be all grants that we will treat slightly differently so that we can see, because as Rick says, they're one-off expense and they're one-off benefits to the organisation, and it also then gives you a very clear picture of what your day-to-day operating expenses are for your business as usual. And how we do it now, it's very difficult to pull that out because it's important that we understand what our day-to-day business as usual expenses are, because grants come and go.
Well, that's right. And you know, with the lap, you never know from one week to the other. It continuously empty grants, and all of a sudden one can just pop out of the blue. You think you have no hope of getting it.
Yeah, we do, as Beck said, try and anticipate which ones we have and which ones will be. The complication with lap 2 is some will go over 4 years. So again, timing is very critical in terms of matching revenue with expenditure. And the other thing that we don't have a clear picture of, and there's a lot of work behind the scenes, is to pick out, we rely a little bit on the revenue flow from grants, and if we're able to go out tomorrow, we need to understand what our true operating costs are.
Thank you.
Anyone else? Councillor Roundtree, you close. Thank you. I'll put the number 9. Put the recommended motion, sorry. All those in favour? Those against, that's carried unanimously. Number 10, operating income expenditure report for the year just completed, the 19-20 year to 30 June. Under separate cover, where's that cover hide?
It was in the
It's in that special business advice.
in the agenda.
In the agenda. Councillor Roundtree.
I'm happy to move it, but I want to discuss it.
Okay, you moved, and I have a second. Councillor Ling. Thank you, a second. You've got a question, Councillor. I'll start with you with the question.
Sure, so there's a few things about this report. I read a lot of financial reports. I find these ones a little bit tricky sometimes. I think the first thing is having the positive income recorded as negative to start. It's just got to switch your brain around.
It's local government council.
Yeah, I understand that. I understand that that's why they do it. But you just got to switch your brain around to read it the other way. One of the things in lines, we look at you've got the Excel sheet in front of you, so lines 4, 5, and 6, which is 49, 51, and 52. With all the other lines on the spreadsheet, the actuals and the variance add up to the annual budget, except for in the first 3 lines, and I don't understand why that is.
What are the,
So rate capping, rate rebates, rate objection allowance.
Yep.
All of the other lines, which are the actuals for 1920, and then the variance, if you add the variance and the actuals together, you end up with the annual budget figure, except for those 3 what I just mentioned. For instance, if you add the actuals of 19,345 to minus 655, you get 18,690, not the 20,000 in the budget line. And I wasn't sure whether it's read wrong or it's added wrong, or am I just not getting what this is throwing at me?
Can I just respond to that one?
Yep.
Just quickly, look, I've got the spreadsheet open in front of me. Sorry, I didn't have it, much to do with this, but that's a good. You've obviously just run a formula down, cross-checking the adds for that. But if you have a look, there's a slightly different formula in each of those 3 cells, and what it's doing is it's got the minus sign the wrong way around. So if that was plus 655, for instance, and then you added the actuals of 19,345 in, that would come to 20,000. And same with if that was plus 641 in the variance column and plus 492 or 429. So unfortunately, what that is a formula error.
Yeah. And that's what I thought it might have been as a formula.
Yeah.
It's one of the things that when you're looking at information, this sort of stuff can throw things out. It is what is interesting though, if you add the first 5 columns vertically, they end up the same. So
yeah. Yeah, no, clearly you can see. I see what you mean there, and I think too, it's what's brought it about is the fact that you'll notice that they're not negative amounts. It's rate capping, rate rebate, rate objections. So they're like negative income items. So they're positive.
yeah,
So I suspect that's how come the errors come about.
yeah.
Yeah. So they're not income items. I suppose they're income items, but they're income refunded items, I suppose, is a way of looking at it. So you charge the full amount of rates and then you refund some of it in rebates and capping.
So on that subject, with the fact that we include in these reports the full rates, the accrual version, I suppose we know we're going to get them in at some point, so we've got all the rates in there. We then, so it's not actually an accrual report and it's not a cash report, it's a blend, isn't it? Because tourism income, you won't know what that tourism income is going to be. So you would.
It's definitely an accruals basis report. Because let's say we're looking at this report halfway through the year. Actually, yeah, I see your point. It's a bit confusing. But what I'd be suggesting is you condense the information, so you've just got the net figure that you receive for rates.
And that just hides the detail.
Sorry?
It just hides the detail.
I still couldn't hear you, sorry.
I'm not interested in condensing, it just hides the detail. I want to see the detail. I just want the detail to be correct, that's all.
Yeah, no, well, that in that case, you just change the formula. So, and the formula would make those the 655 positive, the 641 positive, and the 429 positive, and then it would cross out like you said.
Could I just ask? We've got here an advance payment of 1.665 million has been received for financial assistance grant. Where's that showing in is that received by the 30th of June? Or where's it showing in here?
it will be for expenditure for this year, but so.
Sorry?
That was a paid grant that you're talking about.
Yeah.
Yep, so.
Financial assistance grant.
Yeah, so it came late end of last financial year. there would be an accounting treatment to bring it into this year because the expenses will be.
What I'm asking is,
From what I can see on
is your income,
the report, sorry,
this is your income statement up to the 30th of June. So where is that 1.6 million?
in row 18.
Sorry, correct? I didn't get you.
In row 18 is my understanding. So that's yeah, you see there's a grants commission is the name of their master account, and there's an amount in there of minus 2.3 million.
Yeah.
Compared to actuals of minus 2.4 million.
Yep.
So included in that minus 2.4 million would be some, if not all, of the financial assistance grants that were paid in advance. There may be another row further down. I got to admit, I'm not overly familiar with this report. There may be another row further down that relates to the roads component of the financial assistance grants, but I'm not certain. But either way, that's one spot it's included.
That's the bulk of it.
And
People see the line I'm referring to there?
About 3/4 of the way down on the first page. 0060 grants commission.
yeah, the 2.4.
Okay.
Yeah, that's what we received. So that what you're saying we received virtually no grants up until we got the 1.6, which is expenditure for the next year.
This is the current year we're in.
That's right.
Yes.
Yeah, sorry. As of the 30th of June, the year after.
So I've located the roads component. That's near the bottom underneath private works. You see road grants. For those of you who've got the Excel spreadsheet there, it's row 71, or it's account number 01.0966 road grants.
Yeah.
So again, it forms part of the 1.8 million in the actuals column in column C.
That wouldn't be one.
There's a comment there that says increased rates.
Okay, it's not all right.
No, it's
Right.
general
Well,
purpose.
see, that's the thing, it's just like the number.
Yeah.
Okay, the other thing is, it seems to happen every year, and I don't know why, with Tailem Community Centre, what we receive and what we pay them has always got just a little bit of a difference in it. This year it's, we paid them, we received 270 and paid them 293. Sorry, we received actually 293 because I got some extra money. But we paid them $295,499.
What page are you on?
Well, the
Expenditure one?
yeah, the income page is the second to bottom.
Yep.
Other community service, which is part of them. So there was budget for 270, they got 29330. Tailem Ben increased grant for received more than anticipated. But what we paid them when we go into the expenditure is $295,499. We seem to pay them every time, every year, a little bit more than that we're receiving. Now, why that's happening, I've got no idea, but
So correct me if I'm wrong, Rex, but I would imagine that some of that is not payment to them. Some of that will be just maintenance and things like that on the building itself. That's the expenses related to that particular asset.
well, it should not be, because that is a specific grant which only comes through us and then is supposed to be handed on to them. That's
That's one I think we need to take on notice, because I see the issue. I'm looking at the two lines there.
That will be nil.
And the only thing I can think is that we need to make some form of contribution ourselves. But if not, well, we need to investigate why there's that.
That was my fault. That whatever comes into that particular facility goes out again. And so the 23,000 could just be a timing issue that wasn't paid until this financial year, because there was a little bit of money from COVID that they got right at the very end of the financial year that I suspect we knew about but hadn't come into the books. So I don't think that would have been paid until this financial year. But it's money in, money out. We don't pay them anymore.
And sorry, I misled you there. I've just had a closer look, and I can see, okay, there it's out by a couple of grand, but Councillor Arthur, if you look at the year-to-date expenditure, it's 295,000.
Yep.
And if you look at the year-to-date income, it's 293,000. So there's only a disconnect of about $1,700, which probably shouldn't be there, but we'd need to sort of investigate as to why that's happened.
We don't subsidise them in any way.
But what I'm saying is figures don't add up.
That would be a
And there's
timing.
got to be a reason.
Yeah, that would be a timing issue because they think it's COVID money. That
Yeah.
comes into us and then goes to them. And so that would be somewhere around the end of the financial year. Hopefully that will go away soon because we're trying and we're still persisting with getting the grants going straight to them. We don't have to be the middle person.
Yeah.
Well, that's it. Income. Expenditure side. Just a few, there's some comments here, but I'd just like a little bit more expansion on why. I don't know whether it's Deb.
We might have to take
or
on
Rex.
depending what it is.
Yeah, well, I'm just, human resources, for example, we've underspent 31,000.
Which page do you want?
Own 0092, first page.
So Deb will speak to that.
Yeah, just to explain that, Councillor Arthur, that is because we are using in-house services to now perform job applications, advertising, etc., rather than going out to contractors, recruiting agencies. We're doing it in-house now.
Okay.
So that's why there's a saving.
This one, second page, third item, community and corporate. We say $45,160. And it says savings in stationery, postage, advertising, printing, papers due to vacancy in contractual services. That's a lot of savings for advertising, papers and whatever.
We've stopped printing a lot of stuff, Councillor.
Well, you'll recall a few months ago, we put a report up about the service review had commenced, and we're just kind of chipping away at some small savings, some bigger. One was not purchasing the hard copy newspapers anymore, which is quite a saving. There's quite a few that are adding up to make some significant savings, so we're actually really quite pleased with that, and we're still continuing with that process.
Yeah. Okay. Now this is where we get back to Rex. We've got 0194, which is the sixth at the bottom on page 2, which is the council lab implementation council contribution.
That's where, back to Rex's point at the very beginning, we mixed up goods and services. We mixed up that salary and wages related to the staff who were involved in the lab. So this is where we can provide further clarity and save you a question in the future, Councillor Arthur, because that will be very clearly shown as wages.
Yeah, but that's not 269,000.
No, there'll be other things in there as well.
Yeah, so that really does mean.
It doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah, the other thing is we've got $24,773 expenditure on the Bedford Polytunnel, which hasn't been there for 10 years. So I brought this up time and time again on the expenditure side for something that's been dismantled and gone. So is it a case that we just will throw in that number?
No, we never throw in a number,
Well,
Councillor. I have to assure
can
you.
we have a report on why that's in there,
Yes,
please?
we can do that.
Because it's not peanuts.
No. We will take that one on notice, Councillor.
Sorry?
I'll take that one on notice.
Yes. Yeah, Menengi office building. The budgeted figure, and we're 10,000 over budget for electricity. That's something's not right there. It's $10,000, a lot of electricity for a little building like that. So.
Price has gone up there too.
Yeah, we will take that one on notice as well, but to give you more clarity. And this is where Rex is talking about. We will provide that clarity for those types of things that are significantly different, because I think that's important.
That's right.
Can I just comment on that one? Sorry to butt in. It's actually under budget, not over budget, but the reading of it is over budgeted, meaning that they've budgeted too much for that line item. So I'm not sure if that's what you're referring to. It's were you thinking it was over budget, yeah. Councillor Arthur? Because it's actually under budget by 10,000.
It's not overspent. This one is underspent.
Yeah, that's right. So it's better. We should word that a bit better so it makes more sense.
Of course, there's an obvious sense, Councillor Arthur.
It was closed.
It was closed due to COVID for quite a while.
Months. No electricity would be used.
Yeah.
The $10,000 for electricity for that place? Mine on.
We'll have another look, but it's not supposed to be quite.
Hey,
And also, it's not
I'd be happy it's not 10,000 over budget instead of it's.
No,
I'm always happy when I have to explain an under budget by that much.
There you go, councillor.
Oh, sorry, one other item. We have all our toilets listed, as per we should. And then we always have this other public toilets. We budgeted 44, we only spent 29. But can we have an explanation of what the other toilets are? When we've got every toilet is individually listed in the costings. So what's the other toilets?
We will do that, councillor. And the reason that most of them, there's a bit of overs and unders, but remember with COVID as well, most of them were, some of them were closed and we had extra cleaning regimes and others. So that's why it was very difficult for the budget when it would have been set this time last year, wouldn't have predicted COVID in terms of the unders and overs. So,
Yep.
but we will get a report on what the other toilets are.
And the other one that always, I'd love a report on this, please, is the last page, 0455, plant and machinery maintenance, $210,332 over budget. Now, just to have that, just presented that, and it says increased maintenance and repairs due to normal replacement of current plant.
We can.
Now, that is not good enough in my opinion. You know?
Sorry, just very quickly, and limited understanding here, but because they weren't replaced, the maintenance has increased significantly because they're so old and require a lot more maintenance, is my understanding.
So the main maintenance we've done, I believe, is on the graders, and I wouldn't call them old now.
I can't tell you which ones, I apologise, but that was, I queried the same thing.
But something, to me, that something like that should be flashing a red light.
And that's what we want to do, councillor, with what we suggested we were going to do.
Yeah.
In more detail for you.
Yeah. And the cost of plant and machinery, budget relocated to accounts, 101,000.
That's a movement between capital expenditure and operational expenditure, I expect, but I can check that, but that would be my first.
Okay. That's all, thank you.
Thank you. Any other councillors got questions? Yes, there are. There's always very diligent in this area. Is there any other question? Sorry, I'm serious. Councillor Lang, you haven't said the seconder, but Councillor Roundtree wants to close the vote, it will be over. Close, thank you. So I'll put item 10 up for significant discussion. All those in favour? Thank you, Councillor Hill. Those against, I'm putting you in favour. Carried unanimously. Item 11, Capital Works Program update as at 30 June. My first question, I've been long looking for this answer in local government regs. When I see the word carried forward, what do I, as a councillor, deduce from that?
As a councillor or as an accountant?
As a councillor, I'll start with a simple one.
All right. Well, hopefully you'll see that it's something to be considered as part of Budget Review 1. So it doesn't mean it's automatically carried over, but in some instances where there's been, say, a prior approval, and I believe the new corporate system's an example, it's effectively, I think council's hands are tied with that. It needs to be upgraded to one supplier or another. So in that instance there, you'd expect to see an amendment in Budget Review 1 to increase that section of the budget by 72,000. But again, it would need to still be approved at council as part of Budget Review 1. So I know we've already got a component in there for the new corporate system, but I don't recall off the top of my head how much it was and whether it actually needs to be increased. But I suspect in relation to that one there in particular, just using it as an example, a more comprehensive report would be developed by management that outlines the exact costs prior to anything being incurred or committed to. So that's the way I'd see it. So proposed carryover means that management are suggesting that these projects are still valid and should be carried over. you know, and more information provided if council need it.
So from a council's point of view, if they were processes delayed, and we can take motor vehicles in the last budget as one of them.
Yeah.
Delayed for reasons, that could be worded that way, but it's still re-established in the following year's budget or taken from the surplus deficit of last one. But basically each item, if it doesn't get up, and we might use the tailor-made toilets as our best example of something we knew we could not achieve, that shouldn't have the word carried forward. That's re-established each year until it's done or until it's not done. Is that the layman's sort of way of wording it?
So it's not an automatic assumption that if we.
No.
Unless we detail that it's a project that's going over several years, it's not, and the council, I think what the mayor's getting at, it's not an automatic assumption that if there was money allocated in the previous year and it wasn't spent for whatever reason, that it's automatically carried over. It is a re-establishment of that in the priorities and that it needs to be considered again.
Then Rex, or someone give me the accountant's version of the truth.
I gave you the accountant's version anyway. So I don't think there should be any difference. It's for your consideration. You know, with the benefit of hindsight, it's probably a column I wouldn't include in this report, because the intention of this report is to really identify variances to budget review 3, not identify potential carryovers. That's handled in budget review 1. And so the information in that proposed carryover column should actually form a component of budget review 1 and be handled in that occasion. So effectively what's happened by including that column is that there's 2 concepts being mixed together. One's explaining a variance, the other's looking at a budget review. And so ideally, as an accountant, I wouldn't include that column at all. So that's the accountant's answer. But since it's there, what's happening is, as well as explaining the variance, management is saying, well, there's an argument to include these amounts into the 2021 budget as part of budget review 1. Does that answer your question?
Yes.
Yeah.
That's right.
But my question is now, we've got a proposed carryover here for the information technology capital. Is that over and above the 235,000 we've already allocated in the budget for this program this year?
There was about
So it's now a $300,000 project.
No, there was a small amount from last year that we didn't spend. We thought we would in terms of scoping and things. I think it's about 39,000 from memory. And that will be added into the budget.
The quarter of this result, we spent 1,090.
Yes.
Right, so the 72, 9, 10, but we've already got $235,000 in the budget. My question is, this has been put to us as a proposed carryover. Is that on top of the 230?
Yeah. And Councillor, with all due respect, that was very clear in the budget process and the budget papers.
No. Okay.
Yeah, it's important to note that you're not making a decision here, Councillor Arthur. It's a receive and note report, and that once more information is obtained by management and firm costings are available, an entirely separate report will most likely go to council that details what the exact cost will be. And at that point, that's the time to have these types of discussions.
Well, I believe that's right, because I asked the question now. Saves me asking it in council, and by then hopefully we'll have got the answers.
So we're currently in the procurement process with this. So by the next ordinary meeting, in terms of timeframes, by the next ordinary meeting, we should know who the successful tenderer is for the new finance product and the costings.
By then, when we suggest.
Next council meeting, not from today, next council meeting.
No, I would say the one after.
Okay. There's your answer, councillor.
Yep. All right, now the next one is the Dixon Reserve. You know, we were told by the director last meeting everything come in budget, but it's actually come in $45,000 over budget, according to the expenditure here. So, you know, rather than ask a question, we have a report on why it's come in. You've got the 2 items. One was $15,610 underspent. That was the $88,000 budget. And the other one down further,
we will break that up for you, councillor.
it spent $300,000 out of a $250,000 budget.
We'll break that up.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And we'll work out these little yellow things now. Just one point in the, out the Murray Coorong Trail and the Rowgan. You've got the carryover $106,000 for Rowgan, which is already included in our budget, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, but the jetty somewhere along the line, $50,000 has disappeared between there and the new budget.
So it hasn't disappeared, councillor, but there has been preliminary work already done.
Yeah.
Are we talking about the Menindee jetty?
Yeah, 19,855 carried forward out of the 50.
So there was
So
some
that-
money already spent previously?
Yeah, so the 450, okay. No problem. And fixed reserve, that was it, thank you.
Councillor Roundtree?
Whereabouts in this capital expenditure is that, what do you call it, the fish culture? Is that part of capital works or not?
Yeah, that should be there.
I couldn't find it.
47,000.
That's a boat, isn't it?
It's a boat.
What is it called?
Always put up the sailing boat.
It's a boat and it's definitely there because I've seen it. Oh, okay, sorry, councillor, this is June 2020. There was no allocation last year, and that's why it was never done. The allocation is this year in the budget.
Right, okay.
Sorry.
Okay, so we haven't,
So what's listed as an issue?
so it's not,
As a boat
why have
culture.
they not put in there and then put it as a carryover?
Because it was never budgeted for last year. That is my understanding, so it wouldn't be there, there was nothing to, that's why it was not done, because there was no
Wasn't
budget.
it
given to it.
budgeted for the year before that?
Possibly, but I
So
can't
maybe that's
answer.
just dropped
No, it's
off.
not carried forward.
No,
So
it can't be.
it's not carried forward.
There's a massive amount. Went over that and we decided.
Yeah, I understood, remember that part, but I just wonder why you don't see it on there anymore, because it's probably still something looming for us, isn't it?
It's back to what the mayor said, the priority of it wasn't re-established, so it finished at the end of that financial year, was accounted for, and then wasn't carried forward for any more work to be done on it.
Okay, we're considering it again this year.
It's already been done, it's in the
It's in
budget.
this year's budget to complete the project and mount the boat. But the previous advice on why it wasn't put in the year before was probably unclear about how high this boat needed to be.
Right, okay.
So from memory, I think it's 37,000, 36, 38, somewhere like that.
Yeah, that's right.
There is one other point. Is the rotunda, the purchase of rotunda. We've got the details, Richard, you sent out, all of a sudden there's another 10 grand. It's now 32,700.
That's the cost associated with the conveyancing, etc. It's all those
It was
other
always
costs
there.
that we mentioned in the report.
But
Different to the
the
first.
details we got already had conveyancing and all that sort of thing.
Okay.
Yeah.
We, I think we said up to
It was 23,
35,000.
now it's 31, 32.
No,
The motion was
Up to 35,000 motion was
something
something
like that.
because we didn't know the conveyancing fees at that stage.
That seems a very large conveyancing fee to me.
Very large. Very large.
And I'm not sure, but we can check, but we're only paying 50%, so whether we're getting 50% of that back, I don't know the detail of that. Well, that's our 50% contribution. Either way, we can give you more detail, but the motion, sorry, was up to 35,000.
Okay.
We'll get back to you.
You're kidding me.
The amount of schools, yes.
Councillors, we're still, I actually haven't got a mover or a seconder, so Councillor Roundtree and Ling will do for that. Are there any other questions around that update of that process? There being none, we'll close the debate. Councillors. Yes. Hello.
Yes, well, sorry.
Thank you.
Already moved on.
I'll put the petition all over in favour. Those against, that's carried unanimously. Item 12, Treasury Management Report. The debentures, sorry, on ask question 27 and 28, they aren't drawn, they just available.
They just fell.
So they are, in my terms, an overdraft facility. And to bench number 25, bordered down to Tinanara Netball Club, it's sort of unclear whether that's completed or not. How much is outstanding?
Raymond,
Down in community CAD facilities.
which
bench
page?
it-
It's finalised. But
16 of 19.
Well, that's what, yeah,
it goes to
60.
but it goes to 15th of 5th, 22. I'm unsure whether it's been finalised or not, to be quite honest. What I would note is that most of the community groups are, well, generally ahead of their process and they're doing well. I've had committees ask me, what if we haven't got the money this year? I said, come back and talk to us. Because most of them are within our, not even within a fixed sort of process that would be discretionary.
Yeah, Mr. Mayor, with the interest rate of 4.3% and another one at 5.7 and there's one there at 6 point, is there any wiggle room on any of those interest rates, seeing it so low at the moment?
To you, Mayor, we've been trying very hard to do that, and what we're finding is that it's more costing us more to change over.
To break the contract, yeah.
It was one of the first questions I asked when I started, and
1 point, that would have been great rates.
yeah,
And with the LGFA, perhaps a matter of faith, you need to understand that at the end of the day. So the 6.31 is paid out the way I read that.
yes,
That's completed. So the principal debts council has is in the building of this building, the Menengi stormwater process a couple of years ago, and the Cooley Road project. They are, the way I read that,
Yeah.
we appear to have no debts relating to machinery or plant. We have some community debt, which is not really too much. So,
That's a pretty good position.
to my mind, we're at a minus $3 million debt and reducing that at this stage.
Yeah.
That sort of a summation.
In the report, it mentions that staff have tried to get better interest rates, but it's just not worth the refinance.
And so the rate would, if we were to borrow today, the rate would be what?
about 2.2.
2.2, 2.2.
2.4.
Equipment loans of 3.4
There is just
or
one
something.
thing to see, the Lake Albert golf course should be changed from the 15th of March 2019 to 15th of March 2029. It's got 2019 to 2019, so they're actually in arrears.
Which is different to the report we're reading.
Is that the last line?
Period of the line.
Mine says 19.
I just 19.
On page 18, it's got here, cash advance Lake Albert Golf Club from 18/3/2019 to 15/3/2019. Looking at that.
Line of 35,000,
Yeah.
balance 344.
Oh, it's on the
Oh, yeah, yeah.
different chart.
It's a different chart and it is very good picking up, councillors.
Should be 29.
Councillor, you might want to come up and work out how this is
Oh,
on
I better put this last page.
this last table.
Yeah.
But so even I noticed that, didn't that was for a lawnmower, I think, remember, or a green mower. We did grant that one.
I don't know. Get the dirt off my. Right, you guys see, where'd you go?
So just in a broad sense, the next few years, our three principal debts, how much per year do we have to repay? That's too hard a question. It's back in the budget somewhere else. Yeah, just on finishes and just what's the next few years, what are we paying back on those three principal loans?
I could add that up.
Yeah.
It's on the graph, next page.
Yeah. I'm not an accountant, but
Maybe just go to page 13, just scroll down to the next page.
well, I can draw the scroll as well.
Oh,
Yeah, sorry.
Sorry. I'm a hands-free operator, mate.
Oh, sorry, next
It's
slide.
on the-
Right. Oh, gotcha. Okay, thank you.
I've got some figures here in relation to what you're repaying in 2021 and 21-22 in the way of principal. Do you want me to?
Absolutely, Rex.
Okay, so according to one of the detail sheets that fed into the statutory format version of the budget, I've got listed for the 2021 year, so the current financial year, we're going to be paying back $296,000 of principal. And in the 21-22 year, we're going to be paying back $304,000. So I haven't got it past those 2 years, but actually, hang on, I've got it in another document. I'll just bear with me for 2 secs. Yep, I've got it here. So I can actually give you, just so I've got the 296. I'll just talk in hundreds of thousands. So 296 in 2021, 304 in 21-22, 310 in 22-23, 323, 223-24, 330, then 344, then 358, then 374, then 182 in the last year of your 10-year long-term financial plan. So what you'll notice is that you see we're actually repaying for the first 4 or 5 years more principal each year, because the way credit foncia loans work is they're loaded towards more interest being paid off in the early parts of the loan and less principal, and then later parts of the loan, as the loan nears its maturity, higher levels of principal are paid off and lower levels of interest. It's just the way the loan amortization schedules work. So is there a particular year that you had in mind, or you just wanted a bit of a trend as to how much you're paying off per annum?
Just wanted to see that basic, how much principal and how much interest. So
Yeah.
the graph does show that now. It's scrolled in front of me.
Yeah.
No, that's fine, because from informing ratepayers how much we are repaying and what our debt is, we're basically repaying roughly 10% of our debt at the moment each year in a very broad sense.
Yeah, that's a good figure. Yeah.
Just when we present that, do you think we could just council lines and CAD facilities, cash advances, have that as one total, which is the council's liabilities, and the community facilities as a second one? Just because at the present moment on that page it says 2.8 million, but it's got some of the community grants in it. It's just adding that up, the current balances, that's all.
We'll make sure that's clear.
Yeah. Someone want to move this number 12? Councillor Lang and Councillor Roundfoot, thank you. Any further questions around our position there? Moves off my screen very easy.
Close.
Thank you. Close. I'll put the motion as it was. All those in favour? Those against? That's carried unanimously. Number 12. Number 13, other business. Well, that's unusual. Another business influence. Is there anything, while we've got reps here and we have got some time, councillors wish to raise in the terms of finance?
Would what is the council's cash position at the present moment?
I don't have that in mind. Councillor, sorry.
I just, I think it's one thing, particularly in the present situation, it would be nice to know.
I can
And know that we're not going to have to go for a cash advance draw because we've got enough, because we have got rates coming in. But then again, how many people have asked, or the other question I would ask is, how many people have asked and been granted rate relief?
We can take that on notice, councillor, and get that information to you.
Yeah, because I think that is...
So we gave some information regarding that in the last ordinary meeting, but we can give you an update.
Are there any reports in the council meeting to follow that cover off on current cash balances?
Not today, Rick.
No, not today. No. Yeah, that tends to be a bit of an operational thing, but I think the important thing to understand is that that's going to vary from day to day, week to week, month to month, based on a whole range of different things. Least of which is when you receive your grant instalments.
I'm just
around rates time, you're going to get more cash in when when you know a rate installment's due. So it's really an operational matter. I think what you want to try and look at is just whether you're happy with the information you've got in that last report, because you want to look at a whole of council approach, you know, typically as at the 30 June 2020.
It's just that I've seen other councils have, you know, in their report to the council.
Yeah, no, I know what you mean, but it's all stuff that I see has to be presented. Sorry, what was that?
The end of year position, Rex.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that'll come up soon enough.
So the rates are out, councillors, and received the usual inquiries and critiques. My own rates, the valuation went up considerably, and the rate, just crude dollars I've got to pay went up a little bit. Means some other people hopefully will have a rate reduction. I have found those people.
Can I just make a comment, Mr. Mayor? I've 9 phone calls since Thursday, when the first rates notice come in.
You didn't go to the post office. And
some of the rate increases down there are just horrendous. One fella's property is from 600,000 to 900,000.
In capital value.
which is the landlord's
His rates gone up from 2,200 to 4,000. And I've said, well, you got the 10%, and it's going to be another quarter swag 10%. Particularly in our way, I don't know about the rest of the rural situation. But yeah, one fella's 700,000 in value.
It's a conundrum, isn't it?
So one of my questions will be when we get into rating review.
Yeah.
Rex, I suppose the question for you now. Can council apply a rolling valuation average, like looking back 2 years, let's say a 3-year rolling average? Because this has become a real problem with this large lump of certain ratepayers really getting hit up. And I'm well aware of some waterfront people just south of Taylor Bendigo. They had quite a large increase in other properties because there was no increase and they had a rate reduction. And when I explained the process, they sort of got it because it's well, it's not to me, but it's a complex to most people process. But does the Act allow us at all to apply a sort of reverse rolling average to take this hardship job process?
No, they don't. They don't allow it in that area. The area they allow is like you said, the rate capping, which is what you're doing. And so then you just need to decide on a year by year basis as to whether the rate, you want to continue providing the rate capping. So the fact that, they can only have their rates increased by 10% should take away the anomalies of those, those examples that have been brought up today. So other than what you're doing, I don't think there's much more you can do. Having said that, you're undertaking a rate review. And so overall, if you've got fluctuations like that are causing problems, there's various different ways of creating different land use categories or different land zones that then allow you to strike different rates in the dollar for each of those land use categories or land zones. But it's not something that I'm an expert in. That's what you've got David Hope working on. But if there's particular zones or particular land use categories that are going up by way more than other categories, but those types of properties are all mixed into one category at the moment. Well, that's what causes these rate differentialities, because it's just differential. So if one house goes up from 600,000 to 900,000 and everyone else stays the same, well that place will pay significantly more in rates, whereas everyone else's rates will stay roughly the same or reduce slightly. It's pretty complex, but the short answer is no, the Act doesn't allow you to do what you suggested.
My understanding is the Act doesn't allow us to set a different primary production rate across the area for different areas, does it? We must set the same rate in the dollar.
No, that's what I'm saying is part of your rate review is that I can't recall your rate structure at the moment. Do you have a different rate in the dollar for primary production? Sorry, that didn't come through.
Based on the land use codes from the Value General.
Yeah. So if someone's got a primary production, say a farm, are they paying the same rate in the dollar as someone with a residential property?
It's slightly different.
85%.
Yeah, okay, so you've got the differential set up.
So we could reduce that, we could make it 8.
Yeah,
Bearing in mind that it's a conundrum, if somebody's property's gone up 30,000, or 300,000, that's not a bad capital gain.
Yeah, but it still doesn't make him any more income.
And you pay for it.
You know, like everybody says that, that's on a permanent salary. And, you know, the wall's gone to buggery,
Yeah.
and, you know, like, this is the big problem, you know, all of a sudden.
I mean, if the ratepayer felt that it wasn't a fair representation of its value, the ratepayer can appeal to Valuer General to have his his capital value amended.
So Rex, my problem in explaining to ratepayers this is, we can't council just reduce my valuation. I said, do you really want me to go down that path of me deciding that? Because that's what they think.
Yeah.
And I point out that there's several other taxes in this state that are connected exactly to your valuation. So the issue for us ongoing is to hope that the valuation we adopt is consistent across the area and hopefully regularly reviewed, so we don't get these quite large jumps. But we have got a real problem with our rural land valuations have been increasing exponentially.
Yeah, and that's right. And it doesn't necessarily, I can't understand the trend myself, given that you're in drought. I don't understand why these properties are going up in value, but I'm not a valuer. But the fact that they're going up in value, the philosophy behind it, and I'm not saying whether this is right or wrong, and I know there's people that believe it to be wrong, is that the value of your property is meant to be a surrogate for your ability to pay. And you know, clearly that's not the case in a drought situation. So it's just one of those vagaries of the rating process that we've basically had imposed upon us.
Councillor Roundtree, we're on other business.
So 2 things, just on the rates, I did a spreadsheet of mine for the last 10 years and my valuations have gone up triple in 10 years. So that's, I think, quite a lot. But the other thing is on the rate capping, I just wanted to touch on something you said. Is rate capping something that can be decided year on year, or is it once a council has opted to rate cap it forever, or is it year on year?
No, it's definitely a year on year thing. So effectively, if you have a big increase in the first year, for instance, so let's say that increase that from 600 to 900,000 happened in a number of properties, and you bring in rate capping for just 1 year, well, what will happen, and if you don't bring it in for the following year, well, what will happen is that the increase will have effectively just been delayed for a year. So that's what I'm saying is, yeah, you know, if you need to do an assessment each year, but ideally what you do though, instead of that, is you restructure your land use categories and your rate and your dollar per land use category and create additional land use categories if necessary. So you don't have to implement rate capping. Rate capping's there to basically, it's meant to buy your time until such time as you restructure your overall differential rating system. But it's really complex, and you know, they're good questions you're asking, but there's not a simple answer.
Is there a limit to how many categories a council can have for rates?
No, but I've seen a case where a council had about 30 or 40 categories and it was completely unworkable. What I recommend to councils is there's 9 categories that the Local Government Act, or I'm not sure exactly where, might be in Part 10 somewhere, but I think there's 9 land use classes, and of them there's 5 main classes, and so that goes residential, primary production, commercial, industrial, and other. And then for commercial, there's there's 2 levels of commercial, and then there's 3 levels of industrial, and that creates the 9 standard categories that basically the Local Government Act sets out. But if you look at your actual VG report, if you were to have a look at what got sent through, there's possibly 100 different land use categories that the Valuer General looks at, but each of them maps back to one of those overall summary land use categories that we use for rating purposes. So it's incredibly complex and there's no right answer. It's basically, it's really dependent upon the philosophy of council and where they want the incidence of tax to bear, and then the financial people creating a system that delivers that.
Okay, any other questions or other business? I reckon we're done. So, thank you for that, councillors. We've got a workshop. We're going to bring a tour attraction or not? It's 12:30, but yeah, I'll therefore close this meeting. Thank you very much, Rex.
Thank you, everybody, and you have a nice day. I'll catch you next time. See ya.
Yeah, 10 minute break. 10 minute break minimum. We're just going to try and see.